Hello guys, please excuse the hair dye everywhere. I'm well aware it's on my head, I can't get it off. We're going to ignore it. Today's video I want to talk a little bit about a few really important topics. One being the whorearchy, what it is. I've seen a few people totally confused when I mention that in response to comments and try to discuss it. So I want to give a very basic rundown of what that is in this video. I also want to talk about a little bit about like how things that you say, comments that you leave that feed into that whorearchy can actually put workers at risk. It continues to keep us squashed down in society. So we're going to get into it. I'm going to do my very best to be as clear and articulate as I can, and please excuse the hair dye. That's not important in this video. So what is the whorearchy? The whorearchy is essentially like a pyramid structure, a hierarchy system where some workers are at the top and some workers are at the bottom. Now, the way that this system is worked out is generally based on how much contact a worker has with a client. For example, seeing them face to face, touching them, interacting with them, or being online, and also the legality of what they are offering. So this always places street-based full service sex workers at the very bottom of the hierarchy. Before I go any further, I want to make it very clear, I do not support the whorearchy. I don't think that this is a good system. I want it to be dismantled, but I'm just trying to explain what it is so that we have a better understanding of sex workers and this class system that exists amongst us that shouldn't exist. So because this pyramid itself, and you can look it up on Google and have a look at the pyramids and that kind of thing, different sources may rank these classifications a little bit differently, but in general at the top of the food chain will be phone sex operators, because they are having no contact, nobody is seeing them naked, etc. It is just done over the phone. They're generally seen at the very tippity top of the whorearchy. Then you'll likely have cam girls, that's also seen quite high on the whorearchy. Depending on your source, because obviously there's a few different sources here, a few different studies they've done into it, and people rank them a little bit differently. Sometimes OnlyFans will also be ranked up here because they're not having contact with their clients. We then have strippers, exotic dancers are normally placed about next on the whorearchy, followed by sugar babies. For some reason, society likes to rank sugar babies above actual full service workers, despite the fact that they are doing the exact same job as somebody who was previously on those kind of websites. In most cases, there are people that claim that they're not doing the full shebang. Regardless, they're normally seen as next on the whorearchy. We then have full service escorts who are white, generally white, high charging, very privileged like myself, would appear next on the whorearchy. Below that, we have sort of like sub-classifications of workers who are charging less than I am, who would be seen as lower on that pyramid. And at the very, very bottom, we have street workers. So to try to make it more clear, even within, say, the classification of where I would sit in this whorearchy, there are little sub tiers within it. Myself charging what I do per hour would be seen as higher than somebody who charges half of what I do, somebody who does full service in a brothel for $80 like I used to do. I hope we're getting what I'm saying here. It's sort of like tiered within the tier. Now, if you do a deep dive into this topic, you will find that some studies are very different with how they rank us all. Some things like pornography may be seen in a different section than OnlyFans, which doesn't necessarily make sense when most OnlyFans creators are doing porn. However, there are some that are just doing photos, so I guess that's where this discrepancy comes from. All in all, the main thing I want you to understand is that it is a class system where those with less contact and less risk are ranked higher than a street-based worker or a full-service worker. Now, while this is a really hard topic to discuss, this pyramid of like class system does go to show us who is most likely to be a victim of harm within our community, whether that be unaliving, assaults, etc. Because society and even us within the sex work community are enforcing or pushing this class system, which is making those at the bottom be seen as less than human, not just by each other, but also by the general public. Now, how does that eventuate? What am I talking about? As we know, we are seen as less than human by a lot of society, particularly in places where the work is not legal. I am lucky enough where I work, it is completely decriminalized. However, it's sort of seen that these workers are not worthy of protection by the law because their work is not legal, very much like being a street-based worker was not legal here in Queensland, Australia up until August the 1st. So when something would happen to those workers, they were way less likely to come forth and go to the police and seek help or report anything because they would face ramifications for doing so because they're illegally working. It made them an easier target for those intending to do the wrong thing, whether that be somebody who wants to assault a worker or whether that be somebody who intends to murder a worker, okay? Now, unfortunately, given the rise in social media influences sex workers, I guess kind of like myself, we see that the voices of those of us with a higher standing on that ladder get heard more than those at the bottom. And some sex workers have chosen to use that power and that privilege that they have to shit on workers below them. Now, you may wonder watching this, if you're, just a normal civilian, you might be like, why would they do that? Like, why would they want to shit on each other? Why are they not banding together? And I ask myself the same fucking question because it just seems ridiculous to me. Society hates us. Why are we not standing together as a pack? Why are we not fighting for our collective rights? However, it looks like from the research that I have done that this behavior coming from some sex workers is due to, I guess, them scrambling to climb that ladder to be seen as acceptable in society. They want to be seen as acceptable by the general public, so they're sort of saying, well, I only do this, she does that, she sucks dick without a condom on it. Like, that's what they're doing to try to be seen as better than, stomping on everyone below them to be like, no, well, I'm not that bad, I don't belong in the same classification as them. I could never do that kind of work. I only do this, I only offer these services, I only do it online, etc. right? I only work out of 5-star hotels. Like, this is what we're talking about. All of these things feed into this issue. Now, something that often comes up when we're talking about street-based workers, who are those seen on the lower of the pyramid, the very bottom of the pyramid, we see a lot of people say, well, all street workers are trafficking victims. Okay, I see it all the time in comment sections. And I want to clear up a couple of things about this. Firstly, trafficking victims are not sex workers. That's two different things. There are people working on the streets that are doing it consensually, okay? I know that the media loves to portray human trafficking and like every street worker is trafficked into it. None of them are doing it consensually. This is not the truth, and this is not the case. You are most welcome, after watching this video, to do some research of your own, hello Rupert, into human trafficking, okay? Now, while there are some studies that say otherwise, the majority of reputable studies show that most human trafficking victims are not even in sex work, okay? It absolutely does happen. I am not saying that it doesn't happen, it does, okay? But I think society thinks human trafficking, sex work, like that they go hand in hand, when we actually have more human trafficking victims in other industries, okay? And you guys probably didn't even know that. So we actually have more human trafficking victims in lines of work like hard manual labor, like farm work here in Australia. We have a lot in construction, even things like nail salons. We have, more trafficking victims in these kind of fields than we do in sex work. And while human trafficking going on within the sex industry is absolutely still an issue, and we should still be trying to resolve this, I just wish the general public understood that it is not just selling sex that is being exploited here. We have a lot of other industries that are involved in human trafficking, okay? There are so many street-based workers working illegally in countries like the US, they're walking what they call the blade. I think Figueroa is another one. They are doing this out of their own free will, consensually. They are going and doing this job. They are doing it and not being trafficked into it. And I think that we should listen to their voices a little bit more. Plenty of these girls have social media, they're trying to get their story out there, they're trying to have their voice heard, but because they maybe are not as easily digestible to the general public, because maybe they have horror stories, maybe they speak differently, maybe they don't speak as eloquently, whatever the case is, okay, they are not being heard the same way that my voice is being heard, okay? The more that we, and by we I mean both the sex work industry pyramid, the whole pyramid, but also the general public and other civilians, villainize, discriminate, look down on other parts of sex work, the more we are putting them at risk. A lot of the things that you say, a lot of the things that you comment are feeding into that. Essentially, a lot of these comments are coming down to you're seeing it as less than human, it can't be legitimate work, they shouldn't be doing it, therefore they're being seen as less than human. And what happens when those workers are being seen as less than human? They become an easy target, okay? They become the easiest one to go after when you're planning to rape, assault somebody, unalive them, etc., okay? So little things that you say are feeding into this system. And I know there's probably a lot of you watching this that do not give a fuck, okay? I know there's a lot of haters on here, that's perfectly fine. But for those of you who want to support us, please think about this when you're writing a comment. Please think about this when you are writing a comment that says something like, yeah, if I did sex work, I would never offer bareback blowjob. I would use a condom for everything. Okay, because the way that you're wording things and the way that that's coming across is saying that that is gross, yucky, less than, okay? Or saying something like, I would never do that for this much money, is shitting on those workers who have to do that for that much money. Leaving comments like, I would be okay with my daughter stripping, but I would never be okay with my daughter doing full service sex work, okay? All of that, you may think that that's just you voicing your opinion, and by right, by law, you have the right to do so, but you are feeding into this system. You are playing into this fucking whorearchy, and at the end of the day, we want to dismantle it. So what we can do as somebody who genuinely wants to support the industry is show more support for those street-based workers who are trying to get some eyes on what they are doing. There are plenty of them on TikTok, there are some of them on YouTube. Follow them, show support, listen to their stories, listen to their voices, okay? Because unfortunately, they are still not being heard. I really hope that this has been informative for somebody. Also, I'm really sorry if you don't agree with the tiers that I've discussed. Maybe you think things should be swapped around, etc. I've read quite a few studies, and some of them were in slightly different orders, but always phone sex and camming was at the top, and the bottom was street workers with like more elite full service workers above them. And I say elite like this because, again, this is not a class system that I support, and I really would love to do anything that I can to try to help dismantle this or raise awareness about this or educate about this. I hope at least one person that has seen this video is like, fuck, wait a second, maybe I should give a shit about this. So I'm actually gonna add this clip in after the fact because there is one more point that I forgot to address with everything that's been going on online with this debate regarding the whorearchy. In places where street work is illegal, people being like, well, why don't these workers just go and work in brothels? Okay, I've got some videos on my page about my experiences working in a brothel in Australia, which I understand is different to the experiences of those in the US. However, a lot of these brothels are very discriminatory on who they will hire. So the color of their skin is a big thing, the size and shape of their body, their gender, etc. will determine if that venue will hire them, okay? So a lot of these workers, they wouldn't get hired at brothels even if they were to go and apply for them. Now, even if they were to be, I think that there is a lot of predatory behavior going on within brothels, and I have spoken about that. And maybe for some of these workers, they don't agree with a venue taking 50% of what they're making. So before you go online and leave comments like, why don't you just work in a brothel, to these workers, please be a little bit aware of what is actually going on within brothels and the discrimination that is at play amongst them. Yes, that was an important note I needed to include. Thank you so much for listening.